podcast land, and welcome to another episode of Not For Profit, a podcast where we interview people about their path to their purpose and struggles to get on that path. Today's episode, we interview, it's a double-hander. We interview a couple, two filmmakers. One is more in the documentary space, the other is more in the comedy space, but they often collaborate, work together on various projects, Cristin and Tim. And we hear about their journeys and how they came to what they love and came to understand who they are as filmmakers. We also uncover a little about their own, Tim uncovers a little bit about his own past and patterns that he's been following for a while without realizing it. And Cristin talks about how she realized what she needed to do and what she really wanted to do after years of searching. Anyway, this episode is really incredible, and hope you like it. So without further ado, here is the episode. So you guys are going into your own spaces, you say?
Yeah, so I guess for a little background, we're both filmmakers. I started my own production company, Never Not Productions, in, I guess, 2018. Mm-hmm. I'm not great with years. So I had been working for a bunch of other production companies and a bunch of other guys, and I was just tired of working for dudes, honestly, who I felt like were doing it wrong. And we're not open to feedback from other people, and especially women. And I have a background in experimental cinema. Somehow found my way into the doc world, and I was like, I tell stories differently, and I think more people would appreciate these stories. So I started down that path, and Tim and I had already been dating for a couple of years. And he was very supportive about me going out on my own, and then just getting little jobs here and there, and then I was able to bring him on to help me out, and so he's been helping me do it ever since. And so we're very much a team, but we have different interests. So now we're kind of still never not doing doc work, doing more commercial doc work, right, but expanding what else we do and what I guess feeds our soul. Yeah, how we follow our own bliss.
Wait, you were doing docs before?
Yeah, so I originally did a lot of doc photography, so I did a lot of still photography. I'm an image maker by trade, so that's where my skill set is in that
so like
space.
You think I would, like, what kind of hat would be good for me? Like,
I'm just kidding. I don't think you should put a hat on unless it's really bright out. Like, you look wonderful. Yeah. So yeah, I was a still photographer. Dropped out of undergrad several times, had a long wiggly path, and while I was going back to undergrad for the last trip through, I started doing videos for a library, my undergrad's library. We did like informational videos, and that sort of trekked me down the journey of making moving image. Right. And when I graduated, I, for whatever reason, let the image making process go. I was getting very experimental, doing a lot more moving image stuff, and started working in a print shop because I was trying to be like smart and like do the right thing and move forward in a career. And the print shop was awesome, but the experience of like 9 to 5 with people who have like not necessarily fully thought out what they're doing, but don't want to workshop what they're doing was not really that fun. Saved up money, moved to the West Coast, moved to Portland for 5 months, tried to find myself, found that I really needed to get back into image making, got into grad school, and bumbled my way into grad school by talking my way in, and started out doing more documentary photography through the grad program, and something weird happened where I was like, no, memory is what really matters, and started making these experimental layered films from found VHS tapes. I was finding a lot of VHS tapes on New York City street. So I dove headlong into the experimental moving image, graduated, did not find a lot of work making experimental.
Oh, no. Really?
Yeah, I know. It's surprising, right?
Wow.
Nobody wants 37 layers of VHS tape to like sell their product. Like, it's strange. I don't understand. But, yeah, I sort of somehow stuck out making moving image and moved to Chicago for a little while. I think that's around when we first met. It was a year after Cristin and I started dating. Spent 9 months out there helping a buddy start a production company, moved back, and Cristin had mentioned, like, I think I know what I should be doing. I kind of want to do this. And I had worked with her in a couple of things. So I was like, I think you know what you're doing. So, like, maybe trust that impulse. And just kept annoying the shit out of her until she actually started her production company.
The web series thing?
No.
That was before.
Yeah.
That was predating.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so the interesting thing is, like, my true love is comedy, and I've admitted this throughout the years. And if I really think back to, I've always been obsessed with comedy. Like, I was the kid when you got the Scholastic, pages, and you could buy like a book for $2 or like 99 cents.
Yeah.
Joke books, 101
Joke books.
dog and cat joke books, 101 like family vacation joke books. I was like joke book queen. I always watched comedies. I always watched classic comedies. My parents are very funny. My mom has prompted me and my brother to, she just has to start the sentence now. You're so lucky to have such a, and the answer is funny mom. So, like, that's how, like, my brother, we've been indoctrinated with that line for decades now. So all she has to do is say, you're so lucky to have such a what? And we're like, funny mom. So, you would have to you would do things just to have a story to tell mom and dad, because they'd be like, what's going on? Nothing? You don't have any stories? So we trafficked in funny stories. And I went to undergrad, studied cinema, which ended up being experimental cinema, a thing I didn't even know existed. Was very bad at that. Somehow got my degree. Then was plopped back into the real world, thinking that when I went to college for cinema, I would be like Kubrick and Hitchcock and like how to make a film. And it was Binghamton University and state school, not at all like that. Like artsy, flicker films, scratching films. Didn't know what that was. Barely got through. Then when I came out, I was like, okay, I guess I'll try to make a film. And so I enlisted some friends and made a short little script called, like, I think it's called Plan D. And it's about this guy who falls in love with a girl, but he's really nervous and shy. And so he finally gets up the courage. He sees her every day, and she's always walking her dog. And so he finally gets up the courage to see her, to talk to her finally. But every time he tries, the dog gets in the way. And so he develops a plan to kill the dog, subconsciously convince her to have the dog stuffed. He'll take up taxidermy, and then as he gives the dog back to her, ask her out on that date. Like, now he's the king.
Yeah.
And
we shot like, I don't even know if they remember, we shot like maybe a quarter of it. It's on like,
that sounds ambitious.
yeah, it was ambitious for someone who knew nothing at all about how to make a film, really, besides watching them. And I just had no confidence. At the end, it always comes down to my lack of confidence. But anyway, so years later, I abandoned cinema film. I'll never learn how to make, narrative movies. I get into still photography. I moved to Chicago. I moved to the Midwest. That's a whole journey. Anyway, come back to my senses, move back to New York, and get back into experimental film. I'm working at an art museum, Dia Beacon, beautiful museum, in my hometown, actually. And then I decide I need to get out of upstate New York. The Hudson Valley is beautiful, but there are no jobs. I want to be an artist, so I apply to grad school. Get in. Tim and I are not at we go to the same grad school, School of Visual Arts, but we're not there at the same time. I go first. So I go there for experimental film. Like, this is the place for experimental film, or a
So
place.
you paved the way for him.
Essentially,
100%.
yeah. I was like, come here, Tim.
Yeah.
So I went and got into, interestingly enough, appropriated work. I'd already been doing, so like, appropriated work is just, I'm going to take The Wizard of Oz and I'm going to take this scene and show you how messed up it is. That's basically what my work was like breaking a scene that we all know, showing you how fucked up it really is. So that was my grad school years. And then when I came out, I had been working for the art museum in the development office, so I saw how the sausage was being financed, and just in arts, I was on both sides of it. I was the person who took out thousands of dollars worth of student loans, and then I was also the person processing like $1 million paycheck. So that really messed me up. So when I got out of grad school, the very last thing I wanted to do was be in the art world. And it made me realize, like, all I wanted to do was go back to that kid who loved, like, 101 jokes. I really just want to get a pie in the face. I want to go back to the purest of pure, like, stupid joy. I think I went into experimental cinema because you didn't have to really say anything. You can make, and then, well, it's art, so you can interpret it. You know, I have my own ideas, but at the end of the day, if you don't agree with it, it's kind of fine. Like, is there even an idea behind it? I don't know. So I was almost like I got into it as kind of a low self-esteem scam. I'm like, well, if you see value in it, then that's great, because I'm very confused as to what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But I began to find my voice at the end of grad school, and then left, started working at a production company that did doc and commercial work in post-production, so editing, assistant editing. And I learned how documentaries were made, how to do interviews, stuff like that. And I was like, okay, I can like kind of do that. But I got out of grad school. I'm like, okay, I have no desire to make. Like, I was trying to figure out what's like a weird kind of meta. What's a weird kind of meta thing for me to make. And I was single at the time. I'm like, okay, what about like being a single lady? And it's kind of like an essay film, blah, blah, blah. And then this is 2016, and a couple of my friends and I, we were just making jokes, and this joke came up about like a woman who has like no technical skill whatsoever, but she wants to be like Rachel Ray or Martha Stewart, but she's just like totally clueless and really sucks, but wants it so bad. And it was just a joke, like sitting at a table, a joke, and the joke wouldn't leave me. I'm like, what? I started like kind of developing her a bit more, and I told my friends, I was like, yeah, you know, I can't let go of this joke. I think I might do something with it. Like, and that's how April's Apron was born, which is a parody cooking show. She has her own Instagram account, but it's also a 5-episode web series where you see, it's always set like in her kitchen, and in the course of these, she invites you into her home, and therefore she invites you into her like life falling apart. It was very much me just processing what being a failure is. Like, what my biggest fear is finding out that I'm not good at the thing that I love. So then I was like, why don't I, so I had this like separate being that I was creating, why don't I just fuel her with all of my fears of like, I was single at the time, so what if it's like the guy I really love like is a jerk, and I end up alone, and I don't even realize what an asshole he is, and you know, what if I'm not at all talented and I'm super like hacky and cheesy, and like I'm really just, people are laughing at me, not with me. So like, what if I just put all of that like out of my head and like into her? So I like created a being out of some of my fears at the time, and I just made it as like wacky, absurd, but still like at times heartbreaking comedy.
Oh, wow. So you made a monster out of your neuroses.
Yeah.
And filmed it.
Yeah, and I've kind of always been doing that. Even in undergrad, we had to do like a little doc, and I was like, wow, I am not at all inspired. I'm like, so wow, how about I go around asking my friends who are artists what inspires them? So I made a doc about inspiration due to my lack of it. So I'm always like, you know, they tell you to write what you know. So I was like, all right, this is what I know, the fear of just being a hack. And like projecting it to the world. Hello, this is me. Isn't it awful?
It sounds like you always had it in you that you wanted this, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you, because of the fear of failure, you were going through other ways and figuring it out. That happens to me too, for sure. I'm reading this book called The Artist's Way, where you know this book. Okay? She talks about.
You read it?
Not all the way.
Okay.
And she talks about finding the kid in you, the artist,
yes.
and like finding that joy of playing, and that reminds me of the book.
Yeah, it's funny, when I've done the book, I was always like, my childhood was pretty good. I don't need to do this like inner child stuff. I'm like, I'll do everything else. But I've done it 2 times now. I get to week 8 and then things pick up so much that I just can't finish it, or I guess I give myself permission not to. But yeah, it's definitely, I realized that, so April's been going on slowly for 4 years now. Shot it, began editing it, and then wanted it to be so perfect that it could never be. So it's always like, not good enough, I need more time, I need more money, like not good enough, you know, am I even good enough, is this even funny? So for 4 years she's like been on different levels of like life support in a sense. I'd go back in for like a month or 2 and then not touch it. And so I went into like a really deep dark depression this year, and like the lowest low I've ever been, and surviving it has been a blessing, but the key to survival was me refinding my like spirit, my kind of fire. And it was honestly, it's the pie in the face. Like you just want to like do that, like just being the fool is actually really empowering, you know. It's like, because you don't care. Yeah, I'm gonna say this, and if you laugh at me, like great, actually. If you don't, whatever, I'll try again tomorrow. Like that's, to me, there's a freedom in that. And I'm like, just embrace that fool. Like you want to do that, you want to slip on the banana peel, like that is what you like feel like in a sense you're here to do. Like that brings you joy. Like when I'm making a stupid like Instagram post for April, like I chuckle, and Tim loves it when I chuckle because it means that, you know, I'm like fueling that.
Wait, do you have other projects that you're thinking of doing?
Yeah.
They're in super early.
Yeah. They're definitely in super early phases. One is I want to do a series of like spec commercials about a fake product line. So instead of like Miss Myers, they're like Miss Myers-esque, but the whole idea behind it is that what people really do with these products. So like the only reason why I love doing my laundry besides smelling better is that I love taking a nap in my laundry afterwards when it's all nice and hot from the dryer. So I was like,
doesn't it stay wrinkled?
Yeah, but I mean, like, it makes her so happy. I have on more than one occasion actually just dumped the pile of hot clothes on top of her.
Wow.
Yeah, like I love it. It's like I love being wrapped up. I love being swaddled. So I'm just like, that's like oh, this is wonderful.
I know the feeling.
Yeah, so it's just like
diving into the womb.
Yeah.
Just going right back into the vagina.
Yeah, so it's
where everything was safe.
Yeah.
No, it's not me.
But yeah, so I just want to do these like quick little quirky absurdist things about like what do people do when they're like alone. Like you buy these things to like do your detergent, and you buy like floor cleaner, but what's the weird thing that you do after you clean your floor? Like do you then like make burritos on it? Like I don't know, like what are the things that people do alone, and like you clean for a reason, and what's like, well, everything else is a mess, but I'm gonna clean this. I'm gonna buy
the bathroom spray. I think still my favorite.
Yeah, or it's very real. Like, you know, you wake up in the morning, you like have your AM like bowel movement. You leave, you like go to get ready, then you come back in. You're like, oh my god, this is awful. So then you take the spray and you spritz it around, but then you're like, oh well, that's not so bad. You know, like just those moments of like gross realness that we all experience, and that at the end of the day, these products are meant to help with or cover up. Like, why aren't we just honest about how gross weirdos we are?
So you're still holding back on releasing April's Apron?
I'm not holding back.
Yeah.
Interesting phrase. No, I am just doing the final edit.
Yeah.
I'm doing the fine tuning right now. I need to.
There's the stuff with
the sound design.
Yeah. I need to do a fine cut sound design. And I've been working with volunteer lawyers for the arts.
Oh, okay.
An amazing organization that's all over the country, but especially in New York, is incredibly helpful. And so I did my LLC through there, and so they have been a great resource in doing copywriting, trademarking, getting like rights and permission and stuff. So I'm just
there's the assembly of the paperwork.
Yeah, I'm just like doing it all right.
Part of it.
I'm just doing it all right just in case, or actually in the hopes that some bigger entity is like, yo, we would either love to have you redo all of this with like a real budget, or season 2, or do something else. So
I think it's such a strong project. It has such a voice that they're gonna be like, what else you want to do?
Yeah.
What else you got?
Yeah.
Then they just know you have the gumption to do something else. It's not so like, whatever, like we don't know how well it will do or not or whatever, but I don't think that even matters. I don't think it's even relevant at that, because it's a strong voice, and that's actually that's all they need to know. That you can do that. They don't need it to necessarily go anywhere, and it could. Yeah. But they don't need that. They just need to know you have because that's the thing. So many artists don't have a voice. It's the hardest thing. So.
Yeah, we're also we're also have other things in the works and talking with other super talented friends. Another character idea is like this woman named Chris, who has a twin sister named Chris, who would probably both be played by me. And so the Chris that I created she's like a slacker dude, but a woman. So what is it like for like a woman just to like let it all hang out and be that like Seth Rogen kind of stoner character? Her dream is to do like Weird Al food parody songs, but she like works at the supermarket, like organizing carts, so she's just like that lovable loser. What if that lovable loser is like just a woman? And she's just like as gross and weird as a dude, but it's a woman. And then she has her type A twin sister, Chris, who like works in a spice shop and is like very just super type A and controlling and can't deal with Chris, but loves Chris. And so it's always two sides of the same coin. It's always me dealing with like the super bumbly awkward Cristin, and then the Cristin that's like, oh my god, Cristin, shut the fuck up. Don't be weird right now.
Oh my god, I love this.
So that's what we got in the pipeline.
Wow. And you're working on that as well, like in
like once we get to like budgets and images and like the actual making, my end of the spectrum usually is production. So I do help a little bit with concept development, but not as much. Like usually it's like, well, what?
Well, like usually it's like, is this funny? Is this good?
It's like initial taste testing.
Yeah, producer.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I like that. So
wait, you never thought of yourself as a producer?
You always need a producer.
I don't know. It's the getting the money part of the producer that I seem to lack, because everything I work on is always so scrappy, and so it's like, how do I get? That's the part of myself that I feel like I need to develop to be a better producer. Is like, I love money, but not so much that I won't spend it. Oh, sorry.
That's okay. It makes sense.
Yeah, no. I recorded plenty of audio. I should have known better than to do that. So it's just like finding that right balance of like loving money enough to like talk people out of it, but then also not loving it so much that I'm not willing to spend it on projects. It's like that's what I'm missing. I feel like.
Have you gone to any like seminars or things about producers finding money or like things like that?
I have, because I like helped co-produce a documentary several years ago, and that was a really painful experience. As someone who's already very uncomfortable with money, it was even more uncomfortable of an experience. So like how to do crowdfunding, I did that, and then like grant writing, I've done that, and then there's still a block within me, and Tim and I talk about this. We definitely
both have
experience similar blocks. It's just like it's almost like the knowing your worth. You know, not apologizing for like this is what it takes to do it right.
This is what it costs.
This is what it costs.
So we coached the Landmark coach, right? And then she suggested, she's like, you should really be a consultant. She told me, you know, and she's like, it's really easy. There's tons of people that need, you know, public speaking training, camera training, and you're so good at it. You should definitely be working in the corporate space and blah blah blah. And I was like, I don't know. And she's like, well, how much are you worth? How much would you charge? Like, I was like, I really have no clue. And she's like, well, I mean, like, you know, it's normal, like $250 an hour. That's normal. And I'm just like, I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah.
What is that? That's lawyer money.
Yeah. Well, and that's that block that we, or at least that's what it sounds like to me, is that block we talk about. Like I know how much, this gets back to that like scrappy thing I was talking about. I know how much like this project that I'm gonna be going down to South Carolina to film, like I know how much that should cost.
The pewter?
Yeah, working with the silversmith. Like I know how much that should cost, but I also know I own a ton of the equipment already, and a plane ticket's only like $250, so like the project's only $250. So what if it takes me 100 hours to get everything done and done right? Like it's just my time, and it's like kind of ridiculous, because if it's a thing worth doing, it's worth doing right, and doing it right costs money, and so it's worth like finding people who are interested in investing and seeing that thing exist in the real world. And it also doesn't help that like I went to a liberal arts school with a huge science program, so even though it's predominantly a liberal arts program, most of the university's student body and income comes first from the marine science program and second from the business program. And while the school is founded around essentially the art and language programs that I attended, we were thought of as like the bumbly fools. And I developed a lot of that like, God, I wish I could just go to school and draw all day, which is like, you know, it's a little bit more than that, friend. You know, or like, so you're learning how to say, would you like fries with that? And that like, that thing, at least for me, led to this almost resentment and resistance of like money, and that I don't need it to make it work. I can just like scrap together that plane ticket, and my buddy's willing to let me work with him and film him without a talent fee. So like, you know, even though realistically this is all taking our time and our effort, and it should reach out to, you know, whether it's like artist programs, I've worked on grant funded projects, there's options, but it's so hard to like stretch I know what this should cost versus what I can do it for.
I mean, but also you got to consider all your training.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%.
Like, that is all part of that, even 1 hour of your work.
Yeah. I mean, I've been doing photography since 98. I've been doing photography closer to the skill set I have now for the last 10 years. I've been doing filmmaking, or I've been doing some sort of video or filmmaking based work since 2009. I should not be like, I don't know if I should, like, if I can justify reaching out to somebody to get my plane ticket paid for. Like, that's kind of absurd. I have a lot of skills that I spent a lot of time developing, but it's still hard to be like, like you said, I don't even know what I would charge for this. Even if what you're doing at $250 an hour is actually really cheap. And it's still hard to process that.
So, were you gonna try to like get into the ASMR niche?
No, I don't think like it's not. ASMR is not really for me. What it was is it sort of rekindled a project I made in undergrad. So in undergrad back in 2009 maybe, I made this short film. My father is a disabled veteran. He's quadriplegic. And so he went into the hospital and developed what is not coma-like symptoms, but from the outside as a non-medical professional looks exactly like coma-like symptoms, you know, non-responsive, isn't awake, doesn't move their eyes, like all these things that seem very coma-like to a layman like myself, but multiple doctors were like, no, that's not what it is. We don't know what it is, but it's not what it is. Both times figured out it was a calcium deficiency and potassium surplus because they're very similar size molecules, and I think it's the potassium because it's bigger. If you have too much of it, it will actually block calcium absorption, which, and I might have the two of those backwards, but basically starts shutting your brain down. And so like it went from he was having trouble like focusing, which we didn't realize the week beforehand that this was a sign. My father and I both have insomnia, so like there's plenty of times where you just haven't slept and it just seems like it's that. And so he sort of just basically started shutting down, and almost like a toy when the battery's running low. And so we took him to the hospital, and this had happened once before, the year prior. And then the second time, I believe, is when I made the film, because the first time, all we could do was just wait. Luckily, they were able to sort of sort things out, but they still weren't really sure what was causing it. And then the second time, they sort of figured out, and I don't want to get into overly medical details, but moral of the story of my father is I annoyed a lot of my family by proceeding to have one of those little baby point and shoot, like, I don't know if you know the Sanyo Exactique flip out screen memory card camcorders, like super tiny. It's the size of a smartphone.
Yeah, I think I remember those.
Yeah, it was bright pink.
Right.
And so I was filming in the hospital waiting room with a bright pink baby handy cam, like SD card handy cam, because the same thing that had happened the prior time, there was nothing I could do. The only thing I knew how to do to help myself survive this moment was create that mediated space with the camera. And that's what was initially intended to just be this like shield to help me like break down what's happening, process it in a more controlled environment. Is this the moment my father dies? Do I lose this man at this moment where he just sort of like turns off and that's it? And I was in a history of photography class or something like that. I don't even remember. It wasn't really what I was supposed to be working on. This film wasn't what I was supposed to be working on. But I just started turning in chunks of what I had filmed in my class to these crits. And I feel so bad for my classmates because I gave no warnings ahead of time. Not so much because they were going to be seeing like these traumatic things, but more like, guess what we're going to do? We're going to stare at a vending machine for the next 10 minutes because that's part of what I did this weekend. Which is a little cruel when I look back. Like, I still have trouble watching the film. It's, I think, 8 minutes long. But I started stitching it together because I was still under the impression he was going to die. And so I started stitching it together as a 3-act structure. And the entire soundscaping was like a little bit of the wild sound captured by the camera that I had adjusted. And then I took an audio recording of an ice maker at the hospital that just like droning, and that became the bed of the sound, because that, to me, that sound is what hospitals sound like. They sound like some machine off in the distance doing something that you can't really figure out. And I was trying to figure out a way to share that experience to explain what I was going through. So I made this weird film that I didn't really understand, and luckily it didn't get its third act. My father didn't die. I tried a whole bunch of different ways to figure out how to close it out, and just decided, fuck it, this is what it is. It is 2 acts, and it just abruptly ends. And then I set that part of myself aside and went back to doing documentary photography, which was like my true heart and joy, and ignored that was a document unto itself. Mm-hmm. And in grad school, when I was doing the weird experimental VHS stuff, I was showing it silent, and it really made people uncomfortable to watch a 24-minute and 13-second silent film full of cartoons. And I kept getting this note of like, it's really uncomfortable to sit for 24 minutes. I got bored, and I'm like, well, good. This is memory. Sit and learn. Anyways, got the gentle suggestion from Cristin, Peter, my mentor, my advisor, Ed, like, hey, maybe like start adding a little bit of sounds, even if it's just sounds from the tapes. And because a lot of them were street finds, the audio quality wasn't great. And I started like stitching and sandwiching and building this like ridiculous complex sound bed that had like audio dropouts. And so I made this 24-minute soundscape and kind of fell in love with that process of like reinforcing the image on screen, undermining the image on screen, changing the meaning of the image on screen, shifting things, disorienting or attempting to disorient. I think I did that pretty well, and attempting to make certain things more comfortable. And didn't think about until about maybe a year ago, actually not even, when did we go to Reno?
October.
Didn't think about until about October that like the soundscaping of the experimental film, VHS film, wasn't really all that different than the soundscaping of the experimental doc, for lack of a better word, about my father's time in the hospital. And we had been making a lot of material for this brand Tonic, and they had reached out to us. We'd been doing a lot of branded documentary content for Tonic CBD, Tonic Vibes.
They're called Tonic. The website's like tonicvibes.com.
Yeah.
But they started their own farm, Tricola Farms, and so they invited us up all season because they plant the baby plugs, and they grow and harvest it and make their own CBD products out of it. And so they had invited us up. We had documented the whole season for them, and would make videos for them about the process, what it's like on the farm, what it's like in the office, them explaining what they're actually doing, because a big part of their core mission is education, and they want to be as transparent and open and share as much knowledge as possible. And so we had been up there all during the season for all different
end of summer, early fall.
Yeah, different, just when it's being planted, just them checking up on it. And
is it like a week at a time, or
we would go up between
like 4 days
between like 2 to 4 days. They not only grow it, but extract the oil, make their own blends by hand. So it's a super like farm to bottle operation. And so really amazing people. They are just as committed to the plant, to making plant medicine and cannabis and CBD as we are to filmmaking. So we really connected with them. And so we would just go up there, and every week, or every time we would go up there, it'd be like, we don't exactly know what we're doing. We know that
this is kind of happening.
This is what's happening, and we'll find a story around it. So we would go up there, and they're all amazing people, and like all characters themselves. And so we would just go and learn about the plant and about them and about the process, and capture the craft and love that they put into it. And so all summer long we had been making different videos for them, and they were doing a pop-up shop down in Manhattan, and they're like, hey, do you know anything about like ASMR? And we're like, we know it's a thing.
Yeah, we know it exists.
Yeah. And so they were like, could you do like a video for that, and we'll have it at the pop-up? And we were like, sure. And then we just started doing research into it.
10 hours of YouTube. I still get ASMR recommendations months later. So we did a tremendous amount of research, kind of like tried to figure out what we could do, what we needed to get to do more. Did we know anyone who was very into ASMR? We did test recordings. My favorite was sitting in our bathroom recording different like sounds, like plants, dental floss, an electric toothbrush,
the water pick,
and like listening to the playback, and I'm like, what is that noise? It keeps happening. Realizing that I'm hearing the bus outside's air brakes. Just like those kind of like hilarious, absurd audio moments. And so we went up there ready to do a ton of field recordings, and Cristin did a lot of the audio recordings, and then I was like, okay, I've got this. I did 24 minutes of soundscaping. I can make this into a thing. I've got this. And so I built this like sound bed. It's about 6 minutes long, 5.5 minutes, something like that.
The goal was to let the viewer experience the harvest. So just to really experience that, both sight and sound. And we shot more, but we had an amazing library of images and footage from us being on the farm all season long. And so it was just coming up with a narrative of that, how to ground it in place, and then also how to allow you to experience the process of it without anyone saying this is what we're doing. And so it goes right back to our experimental roots, both in terms of storytelling, in terms of a visual narrative, but then also taking on other things such as sound design to kind of clue people in, and how you take them from outdoors to indoors, just how you lay down sound and you gradually bring it up. So you're outside and you hear a little bit of the inside, and then you're inside. How do you usher people around a farm without actually telling them we're going to go around the farm, and without them actually...
in the drying barns.
That video we watched, was that at the pop-up too?
The Tricola.
That was like looping at the pop-up?
The Tricola Farms experience, we're very proud of it.
It was a tremendous amount of fun, and it also like triggered something in me. Like, I don't know if it was while I was making the sound bed or if it was after we were done, but it was like even though I was like, oh yeah, I've done this before, I know what I'm doing, it'll be okay, it was like, oh, I've done this before, this is the thing. And I've had this idea that I've been like workshopping for 2 years now. How long have I been working on the ice thing?
At least 2 years.
I've been at least 2 years. I've been trying to figure out, I'm gonna be real honest with you, how to touch an iceberg. I want to touch an iceberg. No joke. How do I justify this? And it came out of a couple years back. There was a iceberg. The super whiz bang neato fact they used to explain how big it was is the above the waterline ice was taller than the Statue of Liberty that was passing by this village in Greenland that had about 450 people in it. And the iceberg was so massive that the Greenlandic government and I guess the Danish government, the government of Denmark, were like, hey, kind of dangerous. We'll evacuate anybody who needs to be evacuated. Like, bad news. As I understand it, if the iceberg cavus, so if another iceberg falls off of it, because of how massive it was, the wave that would be created from the ice hitting the water would move so fast that if you stepped outside of your door as it broke, you would not have time to see it and go back inside before you were washed out into the sea. And it's just like, okay, so one, I want to touch an iceberg. Two, only like 50 people took up the free evac. Like everybody else was like, it'll go away. It's fine. And I was like, what's that about? What's like, you're so comfortable with icebergs? Like, and later I found like a time lapse of their local news, like had the iceberg as it was like chilling out by the village, you know, over like a day or two as it moved away. And there was like a 2-story iceberg in the harbor just bouncing against a fishing boat, like no big deal. A 20-foot tall iceberg is like, that's cool, it's Tuesday, whatever. So it's only when it's like several hundred feet it's a problem. And it's like, how do you live in this space? Not like, just like, how do you live with what feels to me from the outside, not having to deal with it, a very looming real threat? And you're like, nah, I mean, like, we get icebergs, calm down, guys. Like, and so I've been like trying to figure out how I can go to Greenland and make a piece about this village and icebergs, which became more present as like we're losing ice on Greenland. The Arctic is greening. You know, just like ice is disappearing, and ice makes noise, and ice makes sound, and as ice melts, it makes all these sounds. I don't remember the pianist, but he actually set up a barge in front of some canvassing icebergs, I think in Alaska, and like recorded music where he's playing against the icebergs as they're collapsing into the ocean. And it's just like wild, and the structure and the sound. And so I'd been thinking about these things and the sound, and I'd been thinking about these things, and I feel like honestly the Troll Farm sensory experience was that perfect like confluence of forces where it suddenly dawned on me, this is how I make this film. This is how, like, that's the piece I've been making, is like, okay, cool, Tim wants to touch an iceberg, who cares? Well, nobody really needs to see me touch an iceberg. That can just be a little pleasant side fact that happens while I'm filming this. But
behind
like,
the scenes.
Yeah, BTS, good BTS, good IG.
Yeah.
Sign up for my Kickstarter at the $300 tier. You get to see a photo of me touching an iceberg. No, but you know, this is the story of interest is not really me. I don't know, like, obviously the people in Greenland are interesting because they have to live in this experience, but like the main character is the ice itself, and how do you express the ice? And so like watch Chasing Ice and Chasing Coral, and those are all very interesting, and they're important, and they like,
those are documentaries?
Yeah, they're documentaries. I think Chasing Ice was the first one. It was a documentary about the collapsing of glaciers, the ecological feedback loops that are created as the glaciers, which are freshwater, collapse into the ocean, and they change both the temperature and the salinity of the water. They change the makeup of the water. They change the microbial life. Like all of these consequences of, for lack of a more fun term, global warming, right? You know, these are like hard, concrete consequences, and it's beautiful, and it's crushing, and it's easy to sort of shut that off. Like, we all know things are bad, but what do you do? And I'm hoping that making a different sort of style of film on the same subject, a thing that's more about the experiencing and less about the knowing, it can shift the experience of understanding. And that it's not just like, wow, Greenland lost so much water, I forget, it was just an absurd, like they're numbers that don't even make sense when we think about like how much ice melted during the summer, that ice is melting in the winter, that just recently the Arctic had I forget where in the Arctic, there was a 65-degree day. Thunderstorms are happening 100 miles off the coast of the Arctic Circle, or 100 miles away off the coast of Alaska, you know, from the Arctic Circle. And while thunderstorms have been recorded in the Arctic, it's an extremely rare occurrence that went from like 5 or 10 times in the last 100 years, and then like maybe 6 recorded instances in the 300 years prior, and it's like it's happened like twice this year. So it's like this scaling of things, and like knowing these things is one thing, but how do you act on knowing? How do you move past like a fun size fact, a Snapple cap fact? Like, and I hope, because it's the only skill I got, is by applying this sort of like almost like goofy artist, like earnest intent of experience. Like, here is the experience of this thing. It will create an emotional investment that will drive an effort.
That reminds me of the concept of Leviathan.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And like,
the film?
Yeah.
No, not the film, but
Oh.
even like John Milton in Paradise Lost talk like the devil comes as like a giant, massive whale-like creature, and it represents like so much. It's like the metaphor of Leviathan is really intense and has so many different layered meanings, and the idea of this giant, massive thing floating and representing our doom almost, and just creeping up. It just reminds me so much of Milton's, like, when he describes like Satan emerging from hell. Like, Paradise Lost is super intense. It's crazy. I don't know if you guys have ever read it.
I've read parts of it, and
it's like hard to read because it's all Old English, so you have to go back and forth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was something in high school. We did parts of it, yeah.
And then Paradise Regained is the sequel, right? There's a sequel.
I love it. They've been doing sequels forever.
Yeah. Well, he was blind when he wrote the sequel.
Oh.
And he just spoke it, and his scribe wrote it, and
Whoa.
And so Paradise Lost, how we lose paradise, right? And what that means for and it was the most it was the most realistic depiction of losing Eden that I ever read. Like, it's beyond what the Bible has, and I think he's sort of a prophet. You know, people don't like the idea. The pandemonium comes from Paradise Lost. It's like demons all going crazy. Paradise Regained, though, right? It's like how we get heaven back or Eden back, paradise. To Milton, it wasn't when Jesus died on the cross. He's like, that has nothing to do with it for him. It was when he went to the desert and refused the devil. The devil said, if you kneel down, I'll give you all the kingdoms. If you, turn this stone into a bread or whatever the fuck, I will, give you all the kingdoms of earth so they can make the kingdom of heaven on earth, right?
Yeah.
And when he said no, it meant that now it's all within ourselves, and we can all get it in ourselves with our own hearts. And he rebrought paradise. Like, he brought it back because he shifted all the rules of power, so that it was like an inner power that we all are capable of achieving. And then the world was saved in that moment. Not like everything after is inconsequential to that moment.
Wow.
I mean, that's really
it's
related
short,
to
and
what's happening now.
Yeah.
The more of us, if the more of us are able to do that,
if we all had a deep awareness of what's going
we wouldn't
on,
damage Earth as much.
it could end tomorrow. But but people are just living life through entropy and just like consuming and Koyani Scotzi. Koyani Scotzi. Grubhub is like Koyani.
What's interesting to me was that you talked about the sound of ice machine from your experience with that, and then you're going to the sound of
icebergs. Yeah.
And in a way, it's both of them are related to death, right?
Yeah. Oh man, I hadn't thought about that. Like, so ice is just this like messenger of or portent of doom for me.
I really like that.
And it's weird. It's like because the ice age is kind of the reverse of the global warming, but ice is symbolizing a new kind of. It's like still ice that's bringing back what is gonna mess us up.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's sort of ironic to think, like, that article I was reading last night.
What article?
So I was reading a thing, like, I think it was a Wired article that was, like, surmising someone else's article on the greening of the Arctic Circle. And so, like, what happens as all these plants that have, like, very carefully evolved to handle this extraordinarily cold climate, are they all going to die, which is going to be bad because that's another feedback loop of carbon. And it's like, no, actually, they're taking to the warming extraordinarily well and are potentially exacerbating the warming, which is a bigger issue because now all the dead plant material that has been trapped as peat is thawing and potentially could release, God, it's like more CO2 than we've released. It's like just some sort of it's back to these like absurd numbers that are hard to comprehend. And then like,
oh, that's like Godzilla. I mean,
yeah,
it's
exactly.
Like Godzilla.
Like, yeah.
No. That's the idea behind Godzilla. Like,
what?
We are like messing with the earth, and then these hidden creatures that are worse than what we could
That
ever
are
do
dormant.
come out, and
they destroy us.
And they're way more massive than what we can even do or whatever.
Well, this time it's a flower.
Yeah, but I mean, like, isn't that kind of perfectly ironic? It's like instead of we process these portents of doom, right? We make Godzilla, we make the kaiju, and they're, the original one was the size of what, a 40-story skyscraper, and the most recent Godzilla was like 3 times as high, and it's huge. And it's like, no, what's actually going to do us in is a lot more like War of the Worlds. It's these little tiny things that we set free from the ice. It's the same thing, but we're always like, it's almost like we're projecting that to be destroyed, it has to be this huge thing. It has to be. And instead it's like, no, it's a tiny little plant that's been there long before humanity showed up and is like, oh, I like this weather you guys are making.
Damn,
Let's
that's
make
so
more
lovely.
of it.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm fun at parties.
Yeah.
Really bring the room down.
We definitely balance things
Yeah,
out.
yeah.
Just hit me in the face with a pie.
I'm like, let's talk about, existential dread
Okay,
Yeah.
wait, hold on. How did you guys meet though?
at a party.
We met
at
at
a
a
party.
Caribbean bar at
Caribbean bar.
at a friend's birthday. She introduced us, and then halfway through introducing us, she seemed to regret it.
You guys should talk. You both do
Are
video.
experimental.
Yeah, you two should talk video was what it was. And then like halfway through talk video,
Is
it
that
got weird.
2017? 2018?
2016. It was right,
2016.
right before the
Oh.
election.
Yeah.
We met the Saturday before the election.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Oh, 2016.
Yeah.
So long ago. Isn't that weird? 1990 was 10 years ago. 2000 was 10 years ago. 2016 was 300 years ago.
Yeah, so that's how we met. So I had already left. So I graduated 2014. I was at SVA 2012, 2014. You came in.
2015, 2017.
Yep, 2015, 2016. Yeah.
I was
So
recently.
yeah, we just. There's a chance that other friends.
Yeah, well, we had a year in between.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
but once I left SVA, I was like, it can burn to the ground. Like, I do not care what happens to that place. But I was trying to be sociable, so every quarter I would go to some old classmate's event to be sociable, and yeah, got introduced to this one.
And then the rest is history.
Yeah, so
Wait, it clicked like...
I thought we did.
I could tell he was different. And I could tell he was interested in me. I was like, he's actually listening. I've never had a guy listen to me before. And at one moment, I got cold, and he noticed. He was like, "Are you cold? Do you want my jacket?" And I was like, "No, I don't."
That was the first time you met.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I was like, you know what? Before I left, I was like, how about you like friend me on Facebook?
In my defense, Cristin suspects that this was all like some long ploy. In my defense, I have two things. One, I am very kind and giving.
You are. You're very, very, very giving.
And a little bit doofy sometimes.
It's true.
And so, I was actually I thought I was making a friend. This is 100% true. I even asked her out on a date and didn't realize. I thought I was just like, hey, let's hang out. Let's get a coffee, which I had managed to turn into lunch.
Yeah.
Because I had forgotten that I had invited her, but I like didn't want to backpedal. Because like, lunch. Was it lunch or coffee? Oh no, I don't know. Anyway, so when the jacket thing came up, it was just like, oh, you're cold. I am used to cold weather. Here is my jacket. Would you like it?
Being kind.
It was
He was
not
just being
romantic.
kind, yeah.
It was not.
I'm like, I'm on to you.
Yeah.
That's what I do
Daniel
stuff
did
like that
it
all the
too.
time.
Yeah, it's not really intended to be romantic. I wish I could make that claim. I'm a huge, like, romantic dude. No, I'm actually extremely thoughtless, and I'm like, oh, you look cold. Here, like, quit shivering. You're gonna get sick.
Yeah.
It's not nearly as romantic as it sounds.
I think romance is overrated.
Yeah.
He is an incredibly romantic guy, so it's funny that he's like trying to pull the not romantic.
No, I mean, I think thoughtful and
Loving,
kind is like...
it's not the
one
same as
thing.
romantic.
Yeah,
Yes.
romantic
No.
is Romeo and Juliet killing themselves, and they're like 15 and 16, and you're like, what
and
the
they're
fuck,
making
these
bad
idiots?
decisions.
Yeah.
No one's interrupting and going, hey, look, okay, cool. How about, like, you give it a week?
Yeah.
You just, like,
wait a week.
step back from your families, and you just, like, chill out.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's romantic to me. I don't want anything to do with that. Thoughtful and kind, I am. And I also am getting guffed because Valentine's is my favorite holiday.
Oh.
100%.
Well, that
no
sounds
joke.
romantic.
Yeah, see, hello.
I got two things about that one.
There's always two things with you.
It is always two things because I can't figure out the third act. No, it's like one, Valentine's is not a Hallmark invention. It goes back to like medieval court nonsense. That's why paper's expensive, and you gave paper to somebody you were sweet on. It's actually a little
You love stationery, so.
yeah, I do love stationery. It's a little risque. It's more about like, meeting somebody on the side. That's what Valentine's Day was originally about.
On the side.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was a lot about like, your people who maybe are already taken or you can't really officially engage with. You gave a paper note as this like missive of like, hey. So I think that's hilarious because it's named after, well, I mean, there's a couple of St. Valentines, but they both died. The two that I can think of both died horribly, and we're like, yeah, this getting some on the side holiday where you give paper, we're gonna name this after these two dudes that died really awfully. So that's funny. And then the second thing is like, don't you remember being in grade school and like, or in grade school I had like the Slimer, like, you're the best, or something Valentine's boo joke. I don't know. They're like, you tore them off and they went in the tiny little envelopes and they came with that really bad chalk candy taped to it. Like, that's the kind of Valentine's I love. I love giving these like goofy little Valentine's Day cards. I haven't done it in years and it makes me sad.
But you also were telling me the other day, because I was like, I don't get it. Teach me. And he was like, he loves the like community aspect of it, like especially going back to grade school. It's like everyone, you had to give one to everyone. So it was a day where everybody
got loved.
Everybody got loved, even if you didn't quite like this person. You still had to give them a Valentine.
I remember getting
Valentine's
cards.
I totally forgot.
Yeah, I remember getting Valentine's cards from kids. That
everyone
was like that.
Everyone had to
anything
get
shitty.
America.
Yeah, you couldn't write anything nasty. So even if the way you told a kid you didn't like them is like you scratched out best, or like it's like petty, but also like no matter what, it's still this like nice little card like, you're the best Valentine's from Todd to Tim. But Todd couldn't scratch it all out and be like, you suck, bruh, because like he'd get in trouble. And so like everybody was forced to just at least be polite to each other. Which was not the case for the rest of the year. And I think that there's something very beautiful about like kids that aren't getting, maybe aren't getting good stuff at home, or maybe aren't getting good stuff at school, or maybe both, that at least one day a year, everybody in their class has to both acknowledge that they exist and give them something that's at least kind of nice.
I totally forgot that. That's amazing.
You're welcome. Those are the Valentine's cards I love the most.
Yeah.
Like,
because they sell them in packets, like
Yeah.
Cards?
No, like these kind of cards.
Yeah,
for
it's like
kids,
10
where
or
kids
12,
give to
yeah.
kids.
Oh, I had no idea.
And that was like
Yeah.
the only other holiday where everyone got candy. Well, I mean, it wasn't great candy, but
No, it wasn't.
Yeah.
but it was like a
Halloween.
thing where you all
Yeah.
gave each other little candy.
Yeah, or maybe if not candy, at least a card.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Smarties were really popular for Valentine's. Those little
The heart ones.
Yeah, a little crappy chocolate heart.
Yeah.
So that episode went off on a little tangent about Valentine's. That had just passed recently, but yeah, I totally forgot about those. Yeah, I said it before, but I forgot about those cards back when we were kids. Anyway, I hope you liked that episode. I know it was really surprising, and you're hearing a little more of my co-host and audio engineer, Jisoo. And she's been like really entering the podcast more, and which is great. She has great questions, and so she's the co-host. And yeah, now it's like a two-hander, which is great. I hope you liked that one. I hope you learned a lot about Cristin and Tim, and we will have a lot of their information in the show notes about their production company, the various projects. And yeah, I just love that their process has evolved so much and is starting to be distilled into what it is now, and I can't wait to see more of what they do. So I hope you liked this episode. There was a little delay in the last week, but we banked a bunch more, so we'll be back to a regular schedule, and yeah, I look forward to putting more out there and getting more interviews from interesting people and continuing this thing that we're doing. So enjoy your day, enjoy your week, and be good. See ya.